Filmmakers and TV creators need to take note of what the Duplass brothers and Robert Rodriguez are doing in the entertainment industry space. The whole landscape is changing, and they are showcasing what to actually do about it, right? So many times I see all kinds of content creators lament about the state of the industry. Well, guess what? Instead of just fighting against, what is and stuff like that, why don't we create new models? And that's exactly what the Duplass brothers and Robert Rodriguez are doing. And funnily enough, their announcements happened right around the same time. So what the hell am I even talking about? Well, let's start with Robert Rodriguez. As you may know him, right? He is the filmmaker that made a movie for $7,000 called El Mariachi. It was an action movie, and it became his calling card, and he became one of Hollywood's greatest directors. Truly, right? And he is such an inventive guy and stuff like that. And the Duplass brothers have been acting and creating, movies, TV shows, and things like that for a while. Now, Robert Rodriguez, he created a thing called Brass Knuckle Studios, or Brass Knuckle Films, And essentially, what it is they're going to start off with 4 movies that are going to be funded by investors, and he's going to produce all of them, and he's also going to direct one of them. And there's a potential for franchise and stuff like that. But the core idea is that he's creating an investment opportunity for fans and audiences and filmmakers directly. And that's an insane thing. And so, if you really check out what he's doing, and I've linked to the articles below where you can really kind of deep dive all of this. He is a filmmaker that is poised to pull this off, right? Where essentially the audience dictates what they want to see, which movies kind of get greenlight and developed and so forth, right? That's the exciting part. It's not just a crowdfund, it's more of a true, here we go, you're now a part of this, and you get to participate in the financial upside, right? That's incredible. And, in terms of the actual investment, it's only been launched for, I think, 2 days at this point, and people are pouring money into it. Now, I'm very curious to see how it goes from here. I should say that I am now technically an investor, right? The nice part is that for $250, that's the minimum investment. That to me seemed like a worthwhile thing of okay, let me support someone I really, really love. I'll have a seat at the table, and it gives me various perks, like being able to pitch via a video of a movie that potentially could be made. That's really exciting, right? So I'm going to be keeping an eye on that. Now, the Duplass brothers, what's crazy is that they themselves, they've already kind of mastered the indie game in both producing and selling films. They've done things with HBO and Netflix and beyond. But with their latest project, The Long, Long Night, they've been turned down by streamers, and they've essentially been frustrated by this distribution model, especially because this is a finished product. It's not like they're asking for financing or things like that. They're like, hey, we have made the product, now do you want it out there? And so it's crazy that that is not an option, right? I mean, yes, they could take, I'm sure, a crap deal from somebody, but they're tired of it. And so what they've done is they've partnered with Seed&Spark to allow for distribution, and there's various ways to participate and benefits of that, by joining that sort of ecosystem. But what's the real point of this? Why am I talking about this, and highlighting these directors? And, listen, there could be other examples and so forth, but it's considering the real shift of filmmaking, that crowdfunding is more than just about raising money. And it's no longer going to be just crowdfunding, but it's really looking at sort of investing, if you will. Another platform that is very intriguing to me and I want to learn more about, but I've seen movies get funded through this, is called WeFunder as well. Now, again, that's a platform where you're not just, putting in money for perks, like you get to participate as an actual investor in the movie. Now, before I fully dive in, like I will say with that, there are things like by having investors, you as the, let's say, company have to make sure that, the Securities and Exchange Commission and things like that, like everything's filed and good to go legally, right? Like this isn't a crowdfund is a little bit more loosey-goosey. This is not that, right? So there are caveats, but, this is kind of where I see things going. And so really when we look at it, Robert Rodriguez is showing us that you don't need to wait for permission from studios to fund your movies. You can do this, and rather with the Duplass brothers, rather than have going towards a traditional Hollywood pipeline, why not choose self-distribution, right? And so when we consider kind of the financial side of it, it's not just about money at that point. It's about, as a filmmaker or content creator, it's about ownership and audience building throughout this whole thing so you can control your career, right? That's what we're really talking about. And, one of the exciting things is that audiences are kind of more privy to that and are excited by that, and they want to back people that they believe in. I mean, again, I'm posting the links to the various things that I'm sourcing from, but in Animation Magazine, there was an incredible sort of breakdown of the crowdfunding, like through Kickstarter directly, of how much like what people are raising just specifically for animation, right? In one of the latest reports, backers are stronger than ever with animated projects, pulling in $5 million in pledges last year alone. One of the big projects was animating Cradle, which raised $1.27 million. So, your funding and distribution strategy needs to start with your audience, not an executive's approval, right? Like it shows that there's a viability with that direct self-distribution connection to your audience and just cutting out the middlemen entirely. So, knowing this, like let's really kind of break down the steps, right? So how do you as a filmmaker, as a TV creator, content creator, really apply this? Well, number one, you have to build your audience before you actually need them, right? So Rodriguez and the Duplass brothers aren't starting from zero. They've spent years cultivating their audience. So for you, start now. And maybe you've been doing it, maybe you're not exactly where you want to be. I mean, Rodriguez and the Duplass brothers obviously have a very far reach with their audience, very deep connection, and so forth. And so, that takes time to cultivate. And so you might have to build to those various levels. And as I specifically did with my first two movies, I built one on top of the other. First I started small and really keeping it like, hey, let's literally just make a movie for $5,000. Like, let's be as cheap as possible, see what we can create, and so forth, and make it as good as we can. And then by doing that, it showcased to people of like, oh, look at what he's able to create with just a $5,000 budget. Now, if we invest in him through a crowdfund and stuff like that, and other means, it's not going to be squandered. Like, it's going to be utilized in the best way. It's going to create a great product, and that's what I did with my second movie, Finding Love in Bogota, right? And now, as I go with my third movie, that one is intriguing because there's various moving parts, and I talk about it in my blog. But the point being that, each one is a stepping stone, and you have to kind of really see it that way, is in terms of building your audience as well. So that's number one, is cultivate that audience. And number two is learn to sell your own work, right? The days of make a film and go to Sundance and then get a Netflix deal are just over, right? Like, they're not there. Of course, like film festivals and showcasing your work is all part of it, but I would see that as like a marketing aspect more so than the idea that you're going to get a deal. It's not that it doesn't happen. It's that it's becoming more and more rare, and it shouldn't be the thing. And instead, they always say, like, you need to have distribution in mind as you're, like, developing a project, really. And this is true, but instead of, like, traditional distribution, have the consideration of self-distribution in mind as you're developing your project and throughout the whole process, right? So thinking about those alternative ways, and you know what, even beyond like festivals, you could do community screenings. And now the nice part is, like, you can even like rent out theaters. Local theaters would love this, right? And the cost isn't actually as big as you would want it. Like, there's one that I know that I recommend to a lot of my friends when they want to do private screenings of their movies. It's like $400 for 2 hours, which, okay, yes, that's a cost for sure. However, now imagine that you charge people coming in to watch the movie, and it could be a discounted price, $5, right? Depending on the number of people you get, like, you can get quite a return on that $400, right? So there's a way to do it. And there's other ways to control screenings and your own ticketing and stuff like that. Like, all these online things are available as well. You don't have to just do an in-person screening, although, I like that a lot. But again, you could do virtual ones as well. And so learning to sell your work, and step 3, which is kind of tangential to that, is get comfortable with asking your audience for money, right? Fans want to ultimately support you, and if you've really been doing the work, they believe in what you're doing, they would want to get behind this. And it's not begging, it really isn't. It's just pre-selling your movie, right? That's why learn to sell your own work. Like, this is part of it, that you're really starting to market your movie before you even make it. And that shows the marketability of the project. And, find ways to offer unique perks. What are these inventive ways to become part of it? And, some of it is merchandise, right? Obviously, like, just, as I mentioned with Robert Rodriguez's and WeFunder, there's an actual participation financially in terms of the upside. But of course, like, they can have their name in the movie. They could potentially have a cameo. Robert Rodriguez, in certain tiers, he's allowing like a studio tour of his place and stuff like that. So all these things kind of go into it. But I also do think, like, the one component of like the actual investment side of it, right? When people aren't just buying something, right? Like that there's an actual financial investment upside. Now, to me, that's incredible, because they're like vested, literally investors. And so you have this multi-level marketing where they become your word of mouth people to, want to get this movie out there, at least in theory, right? Because the better the movie does, the more they stand to earn. So that is an exciting prospect. So things are ultimately changing. And yes, the state of the industry has been grim for quite a while. A lot of people lament about it, but we need to start seeing these opportunities that are available to us and start leaning into them, And listen, the path can be arduous, right? Especially if you're starting from scratch. But in many ways, listen, yes, if a studio is willing to cut you a check or financiers to make your movie, great, I love it. I want that for you. But if that's not an option, if you've exhausted that, then yes, we have to also look to alternatives as well and really take back ownership of all of this stuff and find our own path forward. And this is the way. This is a way, certainly, right? There's no ultimate right or wrong way, but this is a very viable path that I see going forward. And I love that Robert Rodriguez and the Duplass brothers, I'm sure more, are going to be leading the way with this for sure. So, I wanted to put this out there so you can take note. But as always, leave your thoughts, questions, comments down below in the description box. Thank you as always for tuning in. I appreciate you. I'll see you next time.